All right, Bob. The bridge episode called the Vendetta or Vendetta. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, Bob, with the
Yeah.
bridge. So we find out, if I have this right, that where to begin. Our bad guy is David Tate, who shows up out of nowhere, but not out of nowhere, but not
Mm.
someone I expected. He's an FBI agent who faked his suicide several years ago. He assumed the identity of Kenneth Hastings, who he apparently killed and ditched the body. Um, he stole some writings from Jack Childress, the crazy suspect from last week, and has been using those to give a political tinge to his crazy plot. But it looks like his plan is really about revenge. See, 6 years ago, this guy, Santi Jr., was partying with Daniel Fry, of all people. He runs out of drugs at a strip club, drives off to get more, and he hits and kills Tate's wife, who was on her way home from sleeping with none other than our pal Marco. And Tate, in this episode, got revenge on Santi Jr., we see, and he apparently has started his revenge on Marco by boning Marco's wife.
Yes. Wow. So this was the episode that was the reveal of how all the pieces on the board are playing with each other, even though because up until now we had been seeing them sort of as isolated stories. There might still be an isolated story or two, but I feel like everyone's connected at this stage.
I feel like maybe Steven Linder, we don't quite fully see his connection yet.
Yeah, yeah. Or the tunnel. I don't know exactly how that plays in completely with this wider revenge plot, but whatever. We're seeing enough that I can sort of decide how I feel about what the statements are and the motivations. And I have to say I'm a little disappointed that it's less to do with political statements and more to do with revenge. And there are some plot holes that I almost want to go back and rewatch certain episodes to see if they actually tie into the behavior that somebody who's seeking revenge would go for versus somebody who's faking a political statement. And I don't know, it just feels like all those people dying in the desert, the picking up the girl who and then putting her out in the sun, like that's a lot of on the fly stuff for a guy who's doing revenge stuff, right?
Yeah, you're right. And so I'll agree. I was going to ask you how the revelation changed how you might feel about the show, and you sort of explained now. And I'm pretty much right along with you there. It's mixed because I like that we have some more direction to the main plot, but at the same time, it's almost a cop-out of a reveal because, as you mentioned, the political statement seems to have been a fake-out, but that's a lot of effort to go for a fake-out, and he's just a mastermind killer who enjoys killing and is trying the very long game, the long con of revenge. So I'm worried. We'll have to see how it plays out, but I'm worried that some of the potential that the show has of creating a rich world with cool characters might have been squandered. Hoping not. We have like three or four, I think 4 or 5 maybe episodes
Hmm.
left to really wrap this up. It could go well or it could go not so well.
Yeah, and I also feel like the show sort of painted itself into a corner because this is a pretty self-contained uh, story. Like, there's going to be a showdown, I suspect, or an interaction between all of these characters that have so much expose, and they're part of this season because they're so pivotal to this killer's master plan of getting revenge on everyone in just the right way. But once that's resolved, everyone that we're seeing has come together, and maybe this isn't the most important thing to point out, but I just find it fascinating. Part of my brain was like, how the hell are they going to make a season 2 out of this show? That's like impossible.
No, you're absolutely right. We were reminded in this episode that Marco isn't really an El Paso cop. His boss is the Juarez guy, and if they
Right.
don't have this killer they're going after, Marco isn't going to have the justification for being embedded with the El Paso crew.
Yeah, and same with Daniel Fry. Like he's part of the story because of this particular case. There's just a lot going on that just would be too many coincidences to keep this same cast of characters running through beyond this storyline. But that said, I guess we should get back to this particular story. It's still got a few episodes, and it ends with him, not to jump ahead too much, but it ends with our killer friend driving off with his newfound lover, and you're dying to know what happens, and it almost feels like it should be like one episode away from the end, but it's like 4 or 5. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's hard to know what his plan for revenge is because on one hand he's killed the guy who killed his wife. and he's already had sex with the guy's wife who had sex with his wife. So that could be hypothetically the end of the revenge. But he might want to take Marco's wife from her, like he lost his wife too, and so that's why you just don't know what's going to happen, and it could be pretty scary.
Yeah, yeah.
But is it really possible that Alma, Marco's wife, had this relationship with this guy, and Marco never saw him because he knows the guy? He would recognize him instantly if he saw him.
Yeah, it seemed very risky for him to have this relationship with Alma and not have that ruin his plan that he's apparently been planning for years and years. Oh, that's the other thing. Just side note, there was an episode way back when where they made a big point of how the recording was done by a guy who was hired years and years ago.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and I wanted to double check if that was congruent with this guy's going crazy and his wife dying. Has it been enough years that he actually has been planning this from years ago, and it was maybe just after his wife died, and it's all part of the long game? Did that all add up to you, or if you maybe you're like me and you didn't like, you know?
Yeah, well, if we can just talk out of our asses about this without having looked it up. So they showed us the first thing was 6 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so let's give him the benefit of the doubt. It was like 5 or almost 6 years ago when he started this long scheme. For some reason, I thought that guy who was hired for the recording was like 3 years ago, but I'm just sort of pulling that out of the air. I might be wrong.
Oh, okay. Maybe you're right.
I
Maybe
mean,
it
still
was.
long enough ago that you're like, holy shit, that's a long time ago, but it could be a long time ago, and this could still be even longer ago.
Right, and how convenient that Marco had an affair in just the right time for Alma to want to have an affair with, a balding, boring-looking guy or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Like,
because that affair still seems like the most boring affair ever. Like,
yeah,
you really want this, right? Oh, I want it. Do you want it?
yeah, that's a buzzkill. That's when, the drive kind of leaves the room.
Right, I would think of all the downsides to having an affair, the fact that it'd be really exciting would be the upside, right?
You'd
But that doesn't
think,
seem
yeah.
to be the case for them.
Right.
So what about the step-by-step process of getting to the big reveal, Bob? So, they've got Childress, and Sonia just doesn't think he did it. And then she finds all the stuff pointing to a Fed, David Tate, who looks like he could have done it, but Marco's like, hey, Sonia, he's dead. But that doesn't stop her. She's like, no, it's still going to be possible because they don't investigate suicides in Juarez. No one believes her. She pretty much gets the Hank at the DEA treatment, like, Sonia, stop looking at this. But she
Mm.
keeps on it. She finally finds out that David Tate has stolen the identity of a dead guy they found. Is Sonia's genius believable to you?
I'm teetering on the fence on this one because on the one hand, it drives the story forward. Somebody has to be the dogged, persistent, and detective-like person. But on the other hand, she's so oblivious to so many other things. It's hard for me to reconcile that. I, it's almost analogous to Monk.
But Monk is like comedy based, right? It's not supposed to be 100% believable.
Yeah, no, it's not. But in the same way that Monk's character is obsessive compulsive, and there's so many episodes for any Monk fans out there. Sorry, I mean I like Monk a lot too. Actually, I've seen a lot of it. There's so many episodes where, and by the way, the guy who plays uh, the DEA lead, older guy, what's his name? The main character. Sorry,
In the bridge,
yeah, that we were just talking about.
the DEA lead,
Not DEA, just the older detective.
Ted Levine.
Ted Levine, yeah, he's like the main guy that always has to give Monk a hard time. So maybe that's the connection I'm making. Sorry
Oh.
for taking forever to come to that, but because Ted Levine plays a similar role in both shows. But and there's so many episodes in Monk where it's like, drop it. Hey, there's no connection. You're making too much of a leap here, and then like the episode ends with like, oh my gosh, he was right. Wow, we should believe him every time. And then the next episode it's like, drop it. You're making too much of a. And I feel like Sonya's already proven herself a couple of times, followed by a couple of drop its, and that's a too long of a segment to explain how. No, it's not that believable because they should give her more credit at this point, or give her no credit at all. But it's hard.
Yeah, for me, what's weird is that we're just supposed to believe that this woman who's quirky and odd and weird and doesn't get people, because of that, she has got this other mystical ability to just know things. Because it doesn't really show us step by step as well as I'd like how
Yeah.
she puts these connections together. We just have to believe that she does.
Right, yeah, it's believable because it's stuffed down our throat, not because we're figuring it out ourselves that it's believable.
Right. So Gus is making a clear move, a play for Sonya now, and they have an interesting conversation, right? Did I get this right? To me, Sonya seems to be saying not that she doesn't like Gus. What she's saying is she doesn't feel like she knows how to be in a relationship and give people what she wants, which almost like leaves a hypothetical door open for Gus.
Right. Well, there were a lot of things in that scene that were almost out of character for Sonya. Number one is she was very self-aware and both admitting that she's not good with people, also admitting that Gus's father wouldn't like it, and then she also asked his age, I think. Like, was there an age question, or like it felt like she was almost wanting to understand, or maybe I just asked that question.
I can't
Um,
remember.
it just seems like she was very meticulous in her approach with Gus, and she is leaving the door open, but she's also nervous about it and thinking it through a lot for the person she is. I'm not sure if that's how I would have seen her doing it, but whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that was an interesting conversation. I sort of like how it what didn't wrap things up in a neat little bow. I actually like that.
Yeah.
One of the other many storylines, Ray's friend, who we know is an FBI snitch, shows up with an ice cream truck, and Ray drags the guns through the tunnel. He seems disappointed not to have to seal the deal again.
Yep.
But Charlotte finds out about the scheme to run guns, and she isn't happy. And then Graciela finds some transmitters with the guns, um, which actually seems like sloppy FBI work if they're trying to mess up. Like they're probably trying to mess up Ray, I suppose, not trying to do anything about getting the guns to Mexico. So they're probably happy with the Mexicans finding out that he's snitching on them.
I guess, yeah, this is one of those side plots that's interesting as a premise, but isn't getting enough expose to really explain itself because I already made the call that Ray is a goner pretty soon anyway. Um,
That's right.
but and I'm not sure if I think the stronger story is Graciela and the FBI going after her. But if it's all about Ray and we don't know his past, then the sloppy work would be justified. But it's not enough expose to know which way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, a little confused about that. Oh, Alma's pregnant, but it's got to be Marco's, right? Because she's only boned her new guy recently,
Yeah,
and she couldn't know she's pregnant that soon, right?
right. That's what I gather too. Yep.
Okay. The last thing I have is it was fun to see Hank not being gringoed by the Mexican chief who's insulting him, and he talks back in Spanish. Way to jujitsu the assumption that no American speaks Spanish.
I like that too. That was pretty cool.
Any final thoughts on the bridge, Bob?
Oh, I've come this far. It's rough around the edges. I have my issues, but it's enjoyable, and I'm glad we're watching it and recapping it. So stay
Yeah.
tuned.
Yeah, and I think the new reveal brought some needed direction to the show, but it wasn't as impactful as I hoped. We're moving into the end game now, and I'm in on the show enough to watch it to the end, but a lot will depend on how they stick the landing in terms of me deciding whether I'll watch after this season.
Yep, me too.